Hey, thanks for tuning in. We are LivingFit, your trainer's trainer. We not only have education courses for trainers to upgrade their game, but we have full on follow along programs, workouts, exercise breakdowns, nutrition plans, and fitness equipment for you to reach your fitness goals. Now, enjoy the show.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Aaron Guyett here, master coach and education director with Living.Fit. And I have the distinct pleasure of talking with Dr. Aaron Horschig. And most of you will know him as Dr. Aaron or Dr. Aaron Horschig on Squat University. He is crushing it in the game with Squat University. And I love that he's crushing it because he's bringing not only common sense, but education back into the forefront, things that are more important than just aesthetics. But before I go too deep down the rabbit hole, I want to give Dr. Aaron an opportunity to talk a little bit about what got him into fitness and why Squat University.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. For those out there who do not know who I am, my name is Aaron. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, strength conditioning coach, lifelong Olympic weightlifter, and just big, weight room nerd, I guess we'll say. I've always been into fitness lifting ever since from an early age. And when I got to college, undergraduate degree, it was time for me to put aside the regular traditional sports of football and baseball. And I actually found the Olympic weightlifting team at my university. I went to Truman State University, which is a small D2 school up in northeastern Missouri, and just fell in love with it. And competed ever since. That's been now, many decades of that. And basically, as I got into being a practitioner, so I was always a weightlifter first, and then decided to go the route of being a practitioner to help other athletes who have been experiencing the common aches and pains that any single person who walks into a weight room experiences, which is one day my knee's hurting. One day my back's hurting a little bit. And we always are looking for, well, how do we solve this? And there's this big gap in the literature, we'll say, is there's people who talk down to others, that's their traditional medical community, and also give us bad information sometimes of, take this pain medication and just stop lifting because that's the reason you hurt yourself. So, as a young weightlifter, I was always frustrated with this. So I just thought, that when I would get out into the community, I would do my part to help educate others who were in my same situation. So along came the opportunity to start sharing my own voice in the world, which became Squat University. Now, the reason I decided to call it Squat University is because I continued to find these deja vu-like scenarios where when doing an evaluation of a patient coming to me for physical therapy, I have to be a detective sometimes to sort of figure out, well, why did this person develop pain in the first place? I'm not just here to put a cold pack, ice pack, ultrasound, dry needle, you send you out the door. I want to solve the why. I want to figure out, why did your pain start? Let's correct it so that not only do I get you out of pain, but I get you back to a high level of performance, which I don't care if you're a weightlifter, power lifter, competitive in any sport, especially, kettlebell sport, things like that. You want to be able to get back to performance. That's why you do the things you do. So in that pursuit, I always found that people were lacking one common movement, and that was the squat, double leg, in single leg. If I strip everything away, take you out of your weightlifting shoes, get you barefoot, and ask you to perform a basic movement of a squat, I can often find the problem in that you have an issue in the way in which you move. Now, from there, I systematically break down the body, and there's a lot of other fun things to do to sort of figure out the why. Is it a movement, stability, mobility? Where's the issue at? But often it all stemmed from a problem in that cornerstone movement pattern of the squat. And I found that when we can rebuild that and conceptually rearrange our athletic priorities to move well first before we move big weight, we can not only get out of pain, but we set ourselves a good stage of foundation to reach very, very high physical performance attributes and, accolades that we never thought we were capable of before. So that's really where Squat University started. That was in 2015 and just been going strong ever since. Like you mentioned, it's all about education, but it's in a way that I want to speak to someone that they can understand on their level. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to have this college level degree in exercise science. But if you have the desire to learn and understand and be empowered to take control of your body, whether that's movement issues, pain issues, things like that, I'm going to speak on your level and give you those keys that you can take away and, figure out things on your own. That's really what Squat University is about.
Yeah, I mean, so it looks like, obviously you've got a systematic approach to helping people understand their pain issues, their movement issues, and things like that. It also, you have a systematic approach in how you're delivering that, on Instagram and on your website. Yep. And now with your new book out, Rebuilding Milo. And I do want to get into that. I just love that whole concept. And we can even touch on your other book, the Squat Bible. But I wanted to ask specifically, so in your assessments, it sounds like you're having them do dynamic movements. Do you also do static assessments? What's your take on static assessments versus dynamic assessments? And then moreover, clearly humans locomote more than anything else, right? We're moving from place to place. So are you finding that your dynamic assessment of the squat is also fixing their basic walking? Or is it vice versa? And I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah. So I would say everything sort of comes together in a complete evaluation. That's really what we're looking for. But the idea that movement comes first. So I have to understand, how is someone moving whenever they're coming into me first? So I get them out of their shoes and I'm looking from everything from the feet all the way up. They've got knee pain, back pain, things like that are more in the middle of their body. I'm looking at how they control their feet. Are they stabilizing their foot? Is one foot turning out? Is one foot pronating more? And then from there, once I have that understanding, I then break down the body from toe all the way up using something called a joint by joint approach, which is something that Gray Cook, Mike Boyle, a lot of those guys have talked in depth before. But basically understanding that each joint of the body has a certain type of characteristic that requires it to sort of connect to other parts of the body. So in our understanding that problematic ankle mobility could lead to problematic movement, and therefore that's why that person has a left hip issue. It's not because the left hip is the problem, but it's the way in which they're moving because of the right ankle. And if I don't screen and uncover the right ankle, sure, I could maybe get their hip pain to go away with some strength work, some mobility work, but I maybe never solve the issue in the long term. And the minute they go back to squatting where they need that right ankle mobility, all of a sudden they push themselves into a problematic movement issue, eventually overloading certain tissues, the pain comes back. So it's all about first viewing the movement, seeing where the compensations are. Is there a hip shift? Are they leaning to one side? Also doing it with load, taking video of someone doing a clean, doing a kettlebell snatch and looking right versus left side. What am I seeing? And then, all right, let's figure out why is that happening. So it could be things like, you said static assessments. I'm looking at lat flexibility potentially, calf flexibility, things like that. But then understanding also how they interplay together with the end goal of getting back to that movement. So in the same session, I'm looking at movement, I'm breaking down the body individually, I'm understanding the connection, I'm rebuilding that person. So I'm not just doing basic isolated exercises with the end goal of saying, hey, let's get back to that very first thing we looked at the very beginning, your squat. Does it all fit together? Let's go through cues. Can we fix it? Now from there, it's just adding capacity. And that's where we, with good training, good movement mechanics, that's where it all fits together.
So then, sort of the follow-on question is, are you finding that when you're fixing somebody's squat, and then particularly this ankle issue, right? So, okay, we've now mobilized the ankle or stabilized the ankle. So now the hip is moving freer. It's not doing all this compensation stuff that it was doing before that was creating all this overuse problem in tissues that shouldn't be having to, be tapped into for that particular movement. Are you finding that that's helping them with sprinting or jumping or running or even just plain old walking?
Yeah, well, I'll say every movement's going to be a little bit different. So just because you fix a squat doesn't necessarily mean that their deadlift, their hinging motions are going to be 100% better, because every single pattern that you do in your mind, it's almost like an engram is the way some people basically explain it. It's the idea that the body works off motor patterns. So in your brain, when you're doing a squat, your brain doesn't go quad fire, calf fire, hamstring fire. It says just squat, because that way you're saving energy and your body recognizes these patterns. So a problem in one pattern doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a problem in another pattern. The body can work around things a little bit differently. So I do find that sometimes, for example, if you have a problematic squat because of a right ankle issue, and I get that squat better, well, sometimes that right ankle issue may have been causing a compensation when sprinting. I just may not have pushed that person into a sprint yet. So I think oftentimes we have to look at these fundamental movements first, which are going to be like your hinges, your squatting, double and single leg, things like that, walking patterns. And often if you can find a problem movement wise in those fundamental movements, the more dynamic movements will have that problem, at least from a baseline perspective. It'll be fixed to a point that it allows someone a greater potential to get better.
Yeah. And then, so would you classify a rotation as a complex movement?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So you're basic, you're looking at squat, hinge, push, pull. Those are your kind of basics. And then from there, rotation. And then from there, locomotion, which is incorporating even more.
Putting it all together. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love that. I love that approach. And so then not only is it a systematic approach to one particular kind of more basic movement, but it's also a systematic approach that then lends itself to the whole human movement being. And I love that you're talking about the way our brain functions in that, because obviously that's a huge component, right? If we're not thinking about the CNS as having to either, jump gaps, to make basic movements happen, where, imagine how tiresome it would be emotionally, let alone physically, to have to think about every single thing that needs to occur for somebody to stand, let alone do a squat or do a hinge or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very cool. So then I want to dive into this Milo character, and why are we rebuilding him, and what is this book all about?
Yeah. A lot of people comment, they're like, who's Milo? Now, I would say, if you've been in the strength community for the while, you've probably heard of Milo. Milo was this ancient Greek Olympian, considered by many to be one of the best athletes of his time. He was a wrestler. And the old story goes that from a very young age, Milo lifted a calf to his shoulders and walked around for a while. And as the calf grew until a full grown bull, so did his strength. So this story sort of set the precedent for modern day periodization and the theme of progressive overload. That's why when you walk in the gym, the first day you can bench press 100 pounds. Then as you slowly apply more and more load, so does your strength get better. So it set this modern day idea of how we look at the gym and overloading the body. Now, the science to it is the idea that our body adheres to this scientific code, in that as we stress the body, we also have to have recovery, natural adaptation, and then slowly over time, we progressively gain in strength, we gain power, any physical attribute. But as athletes, we're never fully adhering to this code. We're constantly pushing against it and disobeying the code. We push harder than we want. The coach says 5 sets of 10. We do 6 sets of 10. The coach says, hey, make this a 7 RPE. I'm going to make it an 8 RPE. We're constantly trying to do 1 more rep, add 10 more pounds, because that's the athlete inside of us. We love pushing ourselves. That's why we play the game. But inherently, it's a double-edged sword, because in disobeying this code of proper stress and recovery equals adaptation, and we sort of butt up against that, we constantly find small aches and pains. There's not a single person that has ever lifted a weight in their life, no matter if it's a dumbbell, kettlebell, barbell, that hasn't had some sort of ache and pain, something sort of hurting one day, the left shoulder, right elbow. And the longer you go, the more aches and pains you feel. Well, in today's society, how are we told to fix it? Well, you're either told on an Advil commercial, hey, take this pill, and just say, what pain? Pain's an inconvenience, cover it up. You go to a medical doctor who, first off, probably doesn't lift. There are some out there that do. Those are my favorite kind of doctors, but most don't. So they say, you know what? You did 300 kettlebell swings the other day. Of course your back hurts. You shouldn't be doing that much weight. Take this pain medication, take 2 weeks off, and slowly get back into it, but don't go that heavy. Okay, there's another problem. The third pitfall, maybe you do have a physical therapist or a chiropractor you can go to. So you go to them and they say, oh, well, let's just treat the symptoms. Let's do some dry needling. Let's pop, send you on your way. Let's do some taping, things like that, where they're only treating the root or the symptoms. They're not actually treating the root cause. Yeah. So my thought in seeing all these patients over all these years is that not everyone has access to a good physical therapist, chiro, strength and conditioning coach, athletic trainer, someone that can say, hey, we need to take a step back and understand why you developed that back pain. We need to understand why you had that elbow pain. There's a root cause, and it often can be traced back to the way in which you're loading and moving. And when we can figure that out, you can get back to doing all that stuff you love to do. But we just got to take one small step back, figure out the problem, address it head on, and now you can go back to what you're trying to do. Well, I saw so many people didn't have access to that. So I wanted to make a book out there that could basically be my extension of myself to every single person, which is Rebuilding Milo. So it's helping you become your own version of Milo by helping you be empowered to take the first steps at addressing your aches and pains. So chapter 1, what's the most common injury everyone has throughout their life at some time? Back pain. It switched to chapter 1. He goes, here's all the different reasons someone would develop back pain. Disc herniation, spondylolysis, different things like that. But it walks you through. It goes, you don't need to have an expensive MRI. You don't need to have, the best master clinician right next to you to figure out how to take those first steps to getting out of pain. Here's what you do. Here's a movement evaluation. Try this test. What'd you find? Based on this and based on all these other tests, here's the category that I think that you're probably in. Here's the first steps to take. Do this exercise. Stop doing this. Do this. Let's slowly progress back. Okay, you're feeling better. Sort of a build your own adventure book of getting back to, all right, now you're out of pain. Well, let's how do we get back from now we're out of pain to squatting 400 pounds? Let's do this. Let's do this. Here's how you progress back so that every single person knows how to take the first steps. And they don't have to sit there clueless, search through YouTube, maybe find someone that knows what they're talking about. Maybe not. They have that book. It's, all there. And then we can walk through knee pain, back pain, Achilles tendonitis, shoulder pain, elbow pain, some of the most common issues that any single person would have.
Nice. And so my guess is then you talk at least loosely, if not exactly, to clarifying the echelons of care as well. So I've been to an ortho, right? Mm-hmm. The ortho is like, hey, let's do surgery, of course, because he wants to make money. And he's like, oh, it's not that bad and whatever. And then I go to a spine and nerve specialist and she tells me, well, just don't lift weights over your head. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I've run into these exact same things, but there clearly is, echelons of care. And I'm sure at some point, right, there's a time where you're like, okay, yeah, you probably do need to go see an ortho. You have exacerbated this issue, multiple times over, or there's a catastrophic, injury, God forbid that would happen, an accident where, if you don't have an ACL, you probably need an ACL, right? Something along those lines. So is that talked about in this book as well?
Definitely. And it always comes with the idea of like, if you're not seeing any progress, here's the test. If you're not seeing any progress, go see a professional. Or better yet, if you have a professional to go to, read this book and go to the professional and ask them if they've read the book, or now you have a better chance where you can quiz the person that you're going to. I always tell people you need to be your own best consumer. And you want to be critical to a point of any single professional that tells you they can fix you and they have the right answer. You should be able to ask why. And if they can't tell you a clear answer, you're probably not at the right person. So, having this book is, yes, it's there for physical movement of being able to get you out of pain, but it's also there for knowledge of being able to be empowered to have a better conversation for those times when you do want to go to a professional, whether it's like you mentioned, any of those different people along the chain. You can have a better conversation and not just take someone's word for granted and be able to ask them, hey, well, during this testing, I found that my back was flexion intolerant. What do you have to say about that? Do you believe that's the case? That way you can have a better conversation, and that's going to lead to better outcomes in the end.
Yeah, 100%. I love the whole idea of empowering the individual, right? Yeah. So, and that's the thing. That's when you've got a good ortho, you've got a good doctor of physical therapy like yourself, you got a good trainer when they're empowering you. We just did this really cool launch on Choose Your Own Adventure, and it was Choose Your Own Fitness Adventure, right? Whereas you're saying Choose Your Own Therapy Adventure, and obviously it's not an adventure if you're injured, right? It tends to suck, but if you have knowledge and you are empowered, now you don't feel lost, discouraged, all of those things that tend to plague the entirety of the fitness industry, and especially the people that just get into fitness immediately find themselves out of fitness because they're like, man, I'm either confused or I'm intimidated, or, I have to listen to this trainer who's yelling at me, or I have to listen to this coach who's telling me how it is, and I don't have any say. So I just love the fact that you're empowering the individual to then, okay, now I feel like at least I can understand and have control, and I can give away some of that when I know, hey, I've reached the end of my knowledge realm, or I understand this, but I need a professional to actually help me, walk through this correctly. Even though I can loosely understand it, I haven't gone through the doctorate course. So I think that's important. We should double down on that a little bit. So doctor of physical therapy, a lot of times people just think, oh yeah, physical therapy. Yeah. You got your bachelor's and you're walking people through a laundry list of things to do, in their little clinic or whatever. Talk a little bit more about, obvious strenuous work and the amount of study that it took for you to earn this accolade, and how you've been able to now take that information and empower others with it.
Yeah. So if you think about anyone that's an expert in their field, a cardiologist is an expert in the cardiovascular system. You have the medical doctor, you have, every single person has their own sort of niche that they're in. Well, a physical therapist nowadays is the master or the expert in the movement system, the way in which you're moving. And we actually changed to a doctorate level profession in the early 2000s, and have since been trying to educate others on like, hey, if your back's hurting, you can go directly to a physical therapist. This isn't something you always have to go directly to a medical doctor, because when you go to a medical doctor, you get medical solutions. And especially nowadays, the medical solution is painkillers and or surgery routes, because that's what they're taught. Now, yes, there's many different types of doctors, and an osteopath is definitely going to take a more holistic approach. So that's obviously a generalization, but for the most part, people don't think of their first route being a physical therapist. And I want to educate people and let them know, like, hey, if you are dealing with some sort of ache and pain, especially something that's coming out of the weight room, that's a movement issue. That's not a medical issue. So going to a physical therapist can be a great first step to getting you out of pain. And like I said, you mentioned, the courses, where most schools are either 4 years undergrad and then 3 years grad school, or a 6-year combination. But yeah, it's a lot of school to get your doctorate in physical therapy nowadays. It's not a bachelor's degree. It's not a master's degree. It's a doctorate level degree.
Yeah, 100%. And that was always, when I ran a training gym and had trainers, we would always talk about that, the echelons of care. And it's like, what we shouldn't do first, unless, you have like literally, the Achilles is gone and the calf is up in the back of the knee, or, something like that. Yeah. Like the first move shouldn't be, hey, go to a medical doctor, go to an ortho, go. Yeah. It's like, hey, there might be ways to create some sort of therapy that is going to get this person back in and moving again and moving effectively, that doesn't go down that potential rabbit hole, and not always, but potential and normal. Unfortunately, that's why the generalization is there, right? Because that tends to be the common thing that happens, is like, hey, you go to an ortho, you get surgery, or you get, some sort of shot or whatever. And that isn't going to handle that right ankle problem, right? It's just gonna put a shot into the hip, or create a surgery in the hip or something like that. And then, okay, cool. But now you have other issues because the ankle's still not functioning properly. Right.
Exactly. I mean, there's a reason why in the United States we have an opioid, epidemic, and we have, how many millions of people get back surgeries that are not needed. And it's because we don't think to ourselves that there's a natural holistic way to fix this, oftentimes by just looking at the way in which you move and going to someone who understands that we can modify your pain without having to give you, drugs, without having to get a cortisone shot, without having to get an unnecessary surgery. There's so many surgeries that happen, and no one ever consults a physical therapist first. And if you did and actually found out, hey, that slightly torn labrum in your shoulder, that's not a bad thing. That's a natural thing. If you were to take an MRI of every single baseball player in the major leagues right now, at least 80 to 85% of them has a torn labrum in their throwing shoulder and yet has no pain. And it's because, small degradations that we see on MRI or X-ray don't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. It's like wrinkles to the skin. It shows age. Your MRI at 25, 35, 45 is not going to look the same as 10 years old. But that doesn't mean that a picture's worth 1,000 words. We have to look at movement, because oftentimes someone can have a weird looking MRI, but be completely pain-free. So just because a doctor shows, hey, there's something that I see on an MRI, doesn't mean your first thing should be, let's sign you up for surgery. It should be, let's get some physical therapy first.
Yeah. I mean, I have a great anecdotal response to that, right? I had C-spine issues and T-spine issues on the MRI. And I've even had fractured vertebrae that I didn't know that I had, right? And from doing stupid, crazy lifting, crossing that line, right? Always trying to get that W as opposed to caring for myself properly. But I mean, now I'm pain-free and I'm lifting the same weights that I was lifting 2 years ago. And I can lift overhead, right? All of those things. And I didn't need shots, and I didn't need opioids, and I didn't need all of those other things. And it's because I've consulted people that were, smarter than me, that knew the therapies that I could pursue and walk those out. So yeah, where could people get the Rebuilding Milo? I think that's such a great first step. If somebody doesn't have immediate access to you, obviously they can go on your Instagram, Squat University. But then Rebuilding Milo, I think, is just such a great first step in helping heal themselves.
I appreciate it. Yeah. So Rebuilding Milo comes out January 19th, 2021. It's available for pre-order right now on Amazon.com. And that's all over the world. So Amazon Canada, UK, France, Germany, all those different sites of Amazon. For those that don't like using Amazon, there's bookdepository.com, barnesandnoble.com. But all different sites should have Rebuilding Milo available for pre-order right now. And excited for it to kick off here in January.
And so do they get the paper copy? And are you doing a Kindle or any Audible or anything like that? Any audio version?
So it'll be hardcover first when it releases. And then I think a few weeks after, to a month or two after, we're going to release the Kindle version of it, the ebook. There won't be an audio version just because the book itself, it requires you to really see and demonstrate a lot of different tests, a lot of different exercises. Those are very, very key points that just don't come across as clearly with audio. But for those that actually want to hear the introduction of the book, I actually read it on my own podcast. I think it was like episode 100 on the Squat University podcast. You can listen to the full 15-minute introduction. So for a little preview of the book.
Yeah, I saw that. And I think you shared that as well. Maybe not the full thing, but on Instagram.
On Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. So this is a question that we ask every single one of our guests. And I am really excited to hear your answer to this, not to put any pressure on you or whatever. But because you are a doctor of physical therapy and you've not only done the work and earned the credential, right? So you have the education, right? Knowledge is king, right? You have the knowledge, but you've been walking it out day in and day out. I mean, you've got some incredible athletes that you've worked with, notably Martins, right? The 2019 world's strongest man. He just gave a big shout out to Rebuilding Milo and obviously to you and the work that you've done for him. And if there's somebody that's pushing the envelope more, I can't think of the person, because to be world's strongest man is an incredible achievement. So what to you is LivingFit? What does LivingFit mean to a doctor of physical therapy that's been boots on the ground, up in it with all of these athletes and people that are just trying to move better and trying to be able to work out and have basic human movement? What is LivingFit to you?
To me, it's the idea that strength is not something that we only do and develop when we are young. Strength is not something that we stop pursuing after we are done with our competitive nature when we're younger, maybe in sports. It's a lifelong pursuit. And I always tell people, I'm going to be squatting a barbell when I'm 90 years old. Are you going to be there with me? And it's the idea that what we do in the weight room is not an end to itself. Now, yes, if you're a weightlifter, powerlifter, CrossFitter, kettlebell, obviously there's that direct connection to the competition side of things, but it is also something that bleeds over into the way in which you live your life. Being able to bend over to pick up a box out of the garage and put it on a high shelf, to walk your, trash outside or pick up your grandkid. These are all things that maybe when you're 20 years old, you're not thinking about. But as you get older, it's so, so important, because I've seen people on every end of the spectrum. I've seen and trained the world's strongest man. I've also trained someone who's 96 years old and trying to just get up out of her chair by herself, and understanding that if you can take that idea of living fit for life, this isn't something that you just pursue at a young age, and that it is strength, no matter if you're trying to do a clean and jerk, whether you're trying to do a very simple kettlebell swing or a kettlebell deadlift, those things, they matter in the gym and they matter for life. And it's something that if we're able to pursue for life, I think you're going to be mind, body, spirit in a much better place throughout the rest of your life than without it.
Yeah, far more enjoyable if you can get yourself up off the ground when you're older than if you cannot.
Very true.
Let alone be able to squat a barbell at 90 years old. Exactly. Aaron, we could nerd out literally for hours. But so I wanted to first and foremost just say thank you so much for sharing your time with Living.Fit. We're absolutely pumped to be able to have this conversation with you. Hopefully this isn't the last conversation. I could easily see us going down a ton of different rabbit holes, talking about movement and talking about lifting and things like that. So we'll definitely have to reconnoiter or reconvene at a later date.
Definitely.
Where can people find you if they're looking for you, whether it's online or on the old social media stuff?
Did it kick off for a second?
Yeah, it's all good. So I'll just hit that again. Okay. I'll have the video editor edit that. Okay. Yeah. So just wanted to say thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, an incredible expert in your field, not only with the education, but with the experience. Wanted to give people an opportunity to purchase the rebuilding Milo. I think that's a great first step for people that obviously, if they're going to do anything in the fitness realm, right, to be able to injury proof themselves, or at least if they have an injury or something like that, be able to take those first steps and know exactly how to do that. So thank you so much. Where can people find you if they're looking for more information about fixing themselves, fixing their technique so they can get back in and perform, whether it's in the gym or in life?
Definitely. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. For anyone that's interested in learning more about Squat University and all the work I do, squatuniversity.com, tons of free content on there. It's usually my blog platform, but then every single social media platform out there, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, every single thing, just search Squat University and you'll find me for some free content, tons of free content. That's what I'm all about, because like you said, knowledge is king.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Aaron Horschig. It's a pleasure to have you on here, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Hey, for more interviews like that, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you're looking for not only those interviews, but follow along programs, exercise breakdowns, workouts, nutrition plans, and fitness equipment for your fitness results, make sure you hop on to Living.Fit, become a member today, and I'll see you on the next one.